Hi everybody, it's Justin Wingate here with another What's New in Media Composer tutorial. Today I'm going to look at the brand new version of Media Composer that came out a couple of months ago, Media Composer 2019. Now I have installed 2019.7, which is a bug fix release. I highly recommend that you look at the bug fix release because it is pretty substantial. As you can see, there are some NVIDIA driver updates. And you'll notice that the bug fix list is very long and some limitations in there. I recommend always reading through that. My rule of thumb is if the bug fix list is more than 2 pages, it's worth installing that version. Of course, the first iteration of this new version, 2019.6, was working pretty well. I didn't have many problems with it, but always a good idea to get that next bug fix release installed so you get the best performance possible. Okay, let's jump in. Nothing really has changed when you launch Media Composer. You'll see your normal select project window, your user profile. I'm going to create a new user profile here, and I recommend if you are upgrading from an older version of Media Composer, do not pull your new profile forward into that new version. I always recommend creating a new user profile when you install that new version. Yes, it will take some time to kind of customize your stuff, but I think it's worth doing. There's been sort of a history of it being buggy if you try and bring an old user profile forward into, especially like new versions that have new features and all that kind of stuff. So, got your user profile, select project. All this is really the same. We here are using a Media Central production server in the background, so I'm going to sign in to our Media Central. If you don't use the Media Central production or Media Central editorial management, then you can kind of ignore these logins. And as a matter of fact, if you are not using any of those back-end systems like we are, you'll probably just see this this section as a little caret with a drop-down, and you wouldn't even see that. One thing that you will notice that is different in this version, right up here in the top right corner, you will notice that we've got these what look like Workspace buttons, and in fact they are. It's not really a mystery, but it's kind of cool how they work. We'll talk about a little bit about that. I'm just going to create a new project here, call it Justin What's New 2019.7. We're going to make that a 2398 project. HD, leave the raster, everything the same, color space. And I'm going to go ahead and jump in here. All right, so we are now looking at the brand new interface for Media Composer 2019. And you'll notice a few things are kind of vastly different. Number one, like we talked about, our workspace buttons over here, and we'll get to those in a second. You may be asking, where's your composer in your timeline window? Well, they're actually over on my second monitor, and I'll show you what that looks like. So this is my right-hand monitor, and you'll see my composer and my timeline here kind of look pretty normal. You'll notice that I can grab the barrier or the boundary between them and resize them. It's really nice and snappy. That's pretty nice. Take note that the composer and the timeline each have these sort of little bars over here to the side. We're going to call those their container tabs, basically, and you'll see what I mean here in a minute. But what I would like to do is actually move everything onto a single monitor arrangement, and that's going to mean manipulating our workspaces, which means we have to talk about host panels and all of that. But to do that, I'm going to start with our bins and our project window, or lack thereof, actually. So one of the major differences in the new version is they've gotten rid of the traditional project window. No longer do you have a project window that sort of floats around. What they've done is they've replaced that with this little bin panel here on the left-hand side. And you'll notice that within that, I'll see a bin. Take note, too, they've actually changed the icon of the bin. It no longer looks like the old two-dimensional bin icon. It now looks like a three-dimensional icon for the bin. Same idea, just a little bit different look. If I create a new bin in here, it'll populate just the same. But notice what's happening up here in this window. This large window here is called my bin container. The bin container is sort of a panel, think Adobe or Resolve, and all of my bins will be displayed within this bin panel regardless of sort of how I arrange them. So by default, when I double click on these bins to open them up, they open up as tabs, which we're sort of used to. They introduced that several years ago in Media Composer, being able to tab your bins. But here's what's really cool about the new version. I can take these tabs, undock them from there, and notice as I move my bin around, I've got these green highlighted areas. And those are basically my docking points. So if I want to take this bin, and instead of it having been tabbed, I want to drop it down here on this bottom docking region. And it's a little goofy to see, but you'll notice now that that bin 3 now takes up this entire portion, and I can take my mouse and drag that down, and now I have an open bin here and then 3 tabbed bins up in this top portion. I can then take another one of these tabbed bins and say dock it over here on the right, and now I have 2 docked bins open that I can adjust the size in between, and I still have this other part of the bin container that contains my tabbed bins. And you can use really any combination of that. I've played around quite a bit with the arrangement of my docked bins, and I can even take this one, dock it here in between, so now I've got sort of stacked bins and then side by side. I can create another new bin, and that will automatically get tabbed into the last selected bin that you had kind of clicked on or active in the window. I can then come down here and dock that down here. So now I've got this kind of strange arrangement of stacked bins, kind of one by itself and then 2 stacked over here to the side. And all of the little frames between the bins can now be manipulated to resize and kind of arrange them exactly how I want. That's the way the new bin layout works. And just like in previous versions, I can come up here and I can go to Windows, Bin Layout, and I can save that layout as a particular bin layout. Now, I'm not going to do that because I haven't named them and I'm just doing this for show, but you can save that as a bin layout and then map that to a workspace later on and make it more convenient for you to get the layout that you really like. Now, back to the Composer and Timeline window. Where are they? Well, they're over there on my other monitor, and there's 2 things happening here. Number 1, I've got a workspace. I've got my Edit Workspace selected. I can change that to my color and my effects and my audio. And what you don't see is my right-hand monitor changing to display all those different workspaces as they're by default set up. So another new little option within Media Composer is under the Windows drop-down menu, we'll see an option for host panels, and you'll see here that it actually sees and lists both of my displays connected to my PC. Now, if you only have a single monitor, obviously it will only, I don't even think it will show the host panels there, but if you have dual monitor or more, it will show those host panels there. If I want to take my Edit Workspace, which I'm currently selected on, I can tell because it's purple. If I want to make that a single monitor workspace, I need to uncheck Display To. And now over here on my other monitor, I can now grab my Composer window. And in fact, I can grab it by its little tab here. And notice now, it's going to let me dock my Composer window kind of wherever I want, top, bottom, left, or right. I'm going to do a traditional single monitor setup here and drop it on the right-hand side. And so here's my Composer panel being massively huge. Well, let me take my Timeline panel now, which is over here, and dock that down below. And so look, there we go. There's our sort of traditional single monitor setup with our Composer window, our Timeline window, and notice that they behave the same as the bin container. You can resize just by grabbing the boundary. Now what I need to do is click on the caret next to my workspace that I'm currently in this case it's the Edit Workspace, and Save Current. Now the funny thing is, if I click on the Color Workspace, it still thinks that is a dual monitor setup using both host panels. So if I wanted to make my Color Workspace a single panel workspace, I would then need to go to Windows, Host Panels, turn off Display To, and then arrange my Composer, Timeline, and my color correction panel, if I'm doing it sort of traditionally, right there. And then in the default configuration for the color correction workspace, they also do open up your effect editor, effect palette, pardon me, and then you can dock that kind of anywhere you want as well. Almost forgot, if you make those changes, you need to make sure you go back to that caret under the workspace you're currently on, click on it, and click Save Current. So now when I toggle back and forth between Edit and Color, my arrangement is on that single monitor. So that's a little bit goofy. In order to change your workspaces from single to dual or dual to single monitor, you have to remember that changing the host panel configuration is part of that customization. Let's go back and talk a little bit more about this bin panel that we have over here on the left-hand side. So while the project window does not exist anymore, I did show you how you can still see that list of bins within this bin panel. The bin panel can be closed. You can just grab the boundary and just pop it over to the left, and it does kind of snap closed. And you just have to remember that your bin container, which is this whole window over here on the left, that will always have your bin panel. You just have to remember to click and drag to open that up. The problem is, if I don't have a project window, where is my format tab, my settings tab, and all of that stuff? Well, they're still there. You just have to now know where to look for them. So you're going to find those under the settings, under the file menu. So click on the file drop down, go to settings, which is Control Shift equals, and here we find our format, project, user, and site settings. And these settings function essentially identically to the way they used to. It's just now they're broken out into project and user settings and site settings. You can still go under user and import a different user profile, go in here, duplicate your settings and modify those. I do like the fact that it is now separated project, user, and site settings into 3 different tabs. I do miss the project window, but I do think this is fairly convenient the way they have it set up. So if you make any changes, there's really no save button or anything. You just make your changes, close the settings window, and you're done with that. If I close one of these bins, and in this case I'm going to close this bin 4, which is right down here. I'm going to close that just by right-clicking on it, close selected bin. If I control double-click that bin, it opens it not only as a separate floating bin window, but that is actually a bin container, just like this whole window here on the left is a bin container. I even have access to my list of bins here. I can then open new bins. I can then tab those new bins into this open bin container and just go to my heart's content. So you'll see now I can then tab that bin container into the rest of my interface. So you can really customize your bin arrangement, your bin container arrangement, your composer and timeline windows in what feels like an infinite variety of ways. This does not only apply to your bins and these windows, but things like your source browser. It'll open up by default into its own window, but I can tab my source browser as well, or dock it rather, and then now that becomes part of my bin layout. If I close that source browser and then go reopen it at a later time, it will open back up where you last had it docked or tabbed. Very convenient. So I'm going to close this. I'm going to kind of clean this up a little bit. So I've removed that second bin container and kind of gotten back to my other view here. Now I can always click on my edit workspace to kind of reset everything back to the way I had saved it before. That's always convenient. And speaking of your workspace buttons here, you can hide that. There's a little tiny little caret down here at the bottom, and I can just say hide workspace bar. And if I want to open my workspace bar, it lives way up here in the top right corner where I can actually cycle through my workspaces and go ahead and show that workspace bar again. So if you really want to save that ½ inch of real estate, click on the caret and you can hide it anytime you like. You can always bring it back up by clicking on the caret up here and show it again. In my next video, I will be looking at some of the new features within the bin, such as the bin map and some of the new button layouts on the timeline. If you look very carefully, you'll notice some old friends are back in the timeline. I won't spend too much time on that, but it is worth mentioning. I hope this has been informative and gives you a chance to maybe jump into the new version and give it a test drive to see how you think it feels. My opinion, Mac and PC both, this version is very snappy, very responsive, and I can only imagine that more bug fixes are on the way just to make it even better, even smoother. So this has been Justin Wingate with another What's New. I hope you enjoyed it. Stay tuned for more.